Hey y'all, and welcome back to My Creative Life with Kel Sweetie, where we DIY, we craft, we thrift, we read books, and we essentially do whatever our creative hearts desire. If that sounds great to you, please subscribe because today we're getting into DIYs for the upcoming Halloween season. I'm going to be decorating the entire house this weekend, and I need to fix up some of the things that I bought and some things that I've been meaning to make. So let's get into it. So this Halloween, I was a little bit more pointed with what I was going to decorate with. Meaning, like, I went into this holiday hunting season with a theme in mind. I essentially was just buying things because I thought they were cute before. And this year, I've kind of mentioned before that it is a Halloween through the decades kind of theme that I'm thinking of for especially the bookcase, which is a new place that I'll be decorating, which is exciting. I realized that I very much like folk and vintage Halloween, which is very interesting as a woman of color to like, considering its history. And it's already kind of difficult Halloween decor hunting as a woman of color because unfortunately, and although slowly we're starting to see some difference in that, a lot of the witches that are like shown and stuff are usually white passing or white women. I have to kind of take it upon myself and DIY some of those figures if I kind of want to see myself in those figures I buy. And that happens, unfortunately, very often. It's something I hope will change in the future. But we are going to get into some DIYs if you are a person of color and you want your figures to kind of represent you and your household. But other than that, there are some other figures that, while I love them, the paint on them just wasn't my like traditional Halloween color palette. Like these back here, these two wonderful trick-or-treaters, and the 99-cent store decided to make some of their own this year. I loved how these two leaned a bit more vintage. However, I love these to death. I'm not a big fan of like their bow being green, and I want to paint that. But that was basically the only thing I really was not loving about it. And considering that's the only thing, I was like, well, I can paint that with acrylic paint at home. So that's what we'll be doing today. For the skeleton, I didn't like his purple. So again, we'll be doing that today. Another thing that we'll be doing, these figurines that I got from HomeGoods. I really did like the pumpkin like soldier nutcracker and the skeleton nutcracker. They looked like vintage. Like I liked how classic looking his face looked and how aged the skeleton looked. I loved his little jack-o'-lantern on the skeleton. However, this year HomeGoods did this whole pastel goth. Like a lot of people were leaning into the pastel goth thing this year. I love that for people who love, you know, year-round Halloween or into that thing. I'm not. I like traditional Halloween. And these were perfect except for their pink collars. I just feel like the pink is throwing me off. But it was the only thing that was throwing me off. Everything else about the figures I really liked. And I just kind of thought, how easy would it be for me to just paint like this ribbon up here and the collar down here and just this on this guy. Just orange, just to get rid of the pink so it's more traditional and it fits in with the rest of my things. Another repaint we're doing is this cutie. She is adorable. I absolutely loved her. I jumped at her. She was at Marshall's. She was so cute. My partner's mother came over recently and she wanted to grab her for herself. She could not. Going back to the fact that I really would have loved for her, to like release two of these in different skin tones just for the representation. Like I would like colors of the rainbow in my Halloween, not just one skin tone. So I will be painting her. to be like a little chocolate baby. But I thought she just looked so vintage and cute and adorable with her little witch hat, and she looks so classic Halloween. It won't be that hard. Again, like, these are mass produced, a lot of these figures. So in all honesty, I know that I can probably do a better paint job than somebody who slapped like the paint on here in 2 seconds. I want to kind of have an apothecary type section or like bits throughout this vignette that I'm doing for the top of my bookshelf, which will lead me into another DIY that we're going to be doing. And I kept seeing these vintage fake books that are like boxes at Home Goods. I feel like everybody's seen these. I love the vintage look, but again, representation is not the best on these. And I don't know, I felt like it would be a very good look to go with those vintage apothecary and some of the other things that I have that kind of lean to that. And this was the best one I'd seen so far. Again, it had a cute little like witch on it with a cat and a jack-o'-lantern and a ghost that I preferred and stuff, because I'm specific about my ghosts. And it looked vintage, and I felt like it was kind of perfect. But I will be painting the front of it so that she is a little black witch. Again, we just need to do better with representation. Like, people of color like to do Halloween too, and they also would like to see some representation in their Halloween decorations. I have been wanting for a while these French F&C apothecary jars, but then a part of me also realized and remembered, you're an artist. Just make the labels and buy some cheap apothecary looking jars from the thrift store, and that's what I did. I bought, during the Halloween thrift with me, I showed these jars that I got while out thrifting. This one as well, which I thought was really cute. And I don't know, I'll probably put some like cloves or dried goods or something like that in them. But the idea is that, and the DIY that we'll be doing is a label. So I'll be designing something in Procreate that looks like those labels. I think that I'll label them like arsenic and belladonna, things like that, and put them in that same style of the label. We'll do that and turn these into some vintage looking apothecary jars for cheaper than $40 a piece. I'm also going to cover these in the same type of labels as the other apothecary jars. And maybe I'll look up some like vintage poisons that were really like laudanum or something that were like really bad, and that's why they have to be in these black bottles or something. I don't know. I'm creating stories. We're building stories here. Then the crepe collar. It's almost impossible for you to try and mess this up because it's essentially just gathering and hot gluing crepe paper. I have like these streamers left over from our Halloween party that we have every year. When some of my favorite trick-or-treat like stands, they have these crepe collars that are kind of like folksy and vintage looking, and I was like, that's made of the same paper as this. I wonder if I could use this in a craft and, you know, just like gather, I feel like this isn't a good representation, but essentially gather them up and kind of put them like around the collar of some of my figures that kind of need like more vintage look to it. I do know that I want to use it on this guy. He is from Walmart from last year. I was so excited to find him. I was also very hurt to find out that I bought one that was broken. Have I fixed it yet? No. Have I had every intention to fix it? Yes. Has it bothered me enough to get it fixed? No. So, will this year be the year that I fix it? Probably not. One Crafty Witch here on YouTube, I love her for especially her Halloween content. She speaks to my vintage Halloween maximalist soul. She has also opened my eyes to the fact that like you can craft your own vintage. The whole reason for those things and those vintage like folk art pieces and stuff being the look that they are is that somebody else made it look like they crafted it. So if you are crafty, you can craft it. eye-opener to me, right? She has one of these and she kind of crafted hers up, painted it a little bit. I don't have a problem with his face. I love his hat. She did put some crepe paper inside of his little bucket, his little candy bucket, and she put some fake candy inside of his bucket, and I loved it. I also think that some crepe, like a crepe collar around his hat, would just elevate it. It would still look folksy and amazing, but just more so. That's what we'll be doing with him, is just kind of making him better than he already is. I got him at HomeGoods this year. I like him. I just think that he could be better. Like, he has this little bow tie right here, and I bought some ribbon that's somewhere. I want to put that ribbon on here. Let's get rid of this ribbon and let's put another different bow tie on it that's just a little bit more like, wow, look at me. There's something that still hasn't like put him over the edge, and I'm gonna figure out what that thing is. Then we will be trying, this will be a brand new thing and kind of out the box. I thrifted this at Savers probably about 2 years ago, and I thought it was adorable. And I still think it's adorable. I was at HomeGoods recently and I saw it out there. And I was like, whoa, I have one of those at home and I thrifted it. It's not vintage. And I found out that actually there's a hole in the bottom of this, and that hole serves a purpose. The reason why those holes are there because they put a satchel of potpourri in the bottom of this and kind of close it with like a label, so that the potpourri satchel, like you can set this somewhere and you can smell the potpourri satchel coming out of the jack-o'-lantern. I thought that was amazing. I love that idea. And now we are going to try our luck at making potpourri, because I have basically the same thing. Now I just have to figure out how to like make a potpourri satchel, and I basically just brought it back to life, which it'll be just in time for the Christmas holiday because I'll start making potpourri satchels all over the place. So anybody who knows me, prepare for that, because you'll be getting a potpourri satchel with your gift probably. And last, I know you're like, Kelsey, how many DIYs do you have? But a lot of them are repaints, and they're simple repaints. So this is probably the biggest thing that needs to be done, and it's also the thing that has gone undone for the longest. I bought these busts 2020, 3 years ago, and I have put them out. The light is completely blowing it out, but I have put these Frankenstein and Bride busts out undone every year, and I bought them at Joann's on sale for like 99 cents a piece. So it must have been that I bought them before they were like, basically they were trying to get rid of all of their stuff. I don't know, but I bought them with the intention of making them look like me and my partner, or painting them as such. Did I get around to that? No. For 3 years I haven't gotten around to that. And so I continue to put them out completely undone and looking like styrofoam. I've not even painted them like a solid color so that they at least look like, you know, this was an actual idea. I love the mold on them. They look so good. I mean, is this light blaring them out? Yeah, sort of. But they look so good. And this is the year I will paint them. Even if I'm painting them a whole solid color, because I get that frustrated with them, they will not go out anywhere unpainted for another year. I refuse to. I feel a lot of possibility for this, but I also feel like I can easily get frustrated with how long the process is taking and just be like, forget it, we're gonna paint it all a solid color, which I will still mark as a win considering how long these have gone unpainted. And they just can't go out as just pure styrofoam again. Those are basically all of our upcycle DIY crafting type of things, except for the big finale. This year I really, of course, like was thrifting on eBay. And I was looking at a lot of Universal Monsters. With that being said, I saw a lot of vintage dolls. I almost bought some of those vintage dolls. Those vintage dolls were at their cheapest, probably $30, which possible, but then once you get shipping put along with it, it's probably coming up to $40, $45. That's how eBay kind of gets you. And there were some that were even as high as wanting to sell The Bride and Frankenstein for $100. And I was just like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to try and make my own vintage looking Universal Monster dolls. But I think I can do it. Am I high confident right now? Most definitely. But high confidence, high reward sometimes. So that is the big project. I'm thinking I'm gonna try and work through these DIYs throughout this week before Saturday or Sunday, because I don't want to kind of have to have like empty spots in my decor and stuff while I'm finishing up DIYs. I want to be like, okay, we have this thing done. Let's put it up there and actually see what it looks like. I feel like I should have like a counter that like counts down how many DIYs we have, just to make a game out of it so that it doesn't seem like I'm so stressed. How many DIYs do we have? We have to count how many DIYs. These, we have the painted bus. We have repainting the 99-cent store trick-or-treaters. That's 2. Repainting and redesigning these little guys. So that's 3. 4 is repainting this witch. 5 is redesigning and just adding a lot of just throw up Halloween all over this guy. Apothecary jars. We're counting that as 6. Potpourri. That's 7. You know what? And we're gonna include with repainting the witch figure, we're gonna count this with it because they're kind of a 2-for-1. So we're gonna count that. So we're gonna say that's 8. And then the 2 dolls, that's 9. 9 DIY craft art projects have to be done by Saturday afternoon. I have some anxiety built up around it. Is it really 9? Hold on a second. It's 9. I counted that right. So 9. I think we could do it. I really think I can knock it out. I just have to have a game plan and I'll start knocking them out. I also think like once I get the ball rolling, it'll just be like, okay, we've got it. I also, one thing that, no, it's 10. It's 10 things. I forgot a DIY. I'm making my own little candy corn. I wanted to buy fake candy. And again, I said you can make that for cheaper than you buying fake oven baked like clay candy corn. So I'm making candy corn. So that's 10. We have 10 things I have to get done in essentially 3 days. This will be a time-lapse video over a couple of days. Future Kelsey, good luck. Okay, I'm hopping in here. I lied. I have 11. I have 11 DIYs. I was about to leave, and then I saw these boards. These boards I got at Home Depot. Because I wanted a vintage-looking painted sign. So 11. 11's a new count. Okay, bye. Hello from VoiceOver Kelsey. I've been waiting to say that. I feel like it's I'm now a YouTuber thing, but anyways, let's get into these crafts. I used a very simple palette for all of these crafts. I didn't mix a lot except for the Frankenstein bust, which we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I did get all of these paints from Michael's. They're the CraftSmart brand. And they always have a buy 4 for $5 or 5 for 4, whichever one it is, sale going on, along with a 20% off coupon. So instead of having to mix all of my colors, which just becomes a pain after a while, I just buy the colors that I need, to be honest. For this one, I ended up using a color called mustard yellow and just white. And I think that the orange I used was called dark orange. It's not coming up on the screen as the name, but it's called dark orange. I just used those colors, and I wanted to start off with a candy corn bow for the cat. I just feel like it was going to be a better fit for how the bow was kind of shaped. It didn't have as many folds, and I thought that the candy corn would come out better. This needed a lot of layers. I don't know, I think it's because of the green, but it definitely needed a lot of layers. And the skeleton figure also needed a lot of layers. Even in the end, this orange still wasn't a clean layer. There was a lot of the purple still showing through, if you see right here. I think that it didn't bother me that much just because of the fact that I was going for a more vintage, rougher look anyways. But if you are going for a very clean look, keep that in mind that, in all honesty, probably putting down a primer layer of white and also using a sandpaper would probably have helped a lot with the application. For me, I was fine with it looking a little rough and ready. Moving on to the witch. This one, I thought that actually the paint was going to go on better because the original paint coat was already pretty matte. I was incorrect. I was completely wrong. I ended up having to use about 3 coats on the skin. Again, I didn't really mix any tones or anything. I used simply just brown. The color was brown. Keep in mind that I think they've changed their brown in the last couple of years because I actually had to buy a new bottle, and this was actually lighter than I thought it was. That worked out fine for me. This was actually closer to my skin tone because of the reddish undertone instead of blue undertones that they usually have in this color brown, but just keep that in mind when you're going to go buy this paint. But like I said, I had to use 3 coats of paint. It was relatively easy though, painting all of these figures. The paint job on these are already pretty rough because they're mass produced. So it's not like you painting it, in all honesty, is probably going to make it cleaner than how you bought it at the store. And for the cheeks and the lips, I did use a bit of red. I used a color called Bright Red. I just kind of dabbed it on while it was still wet, and so when it dried, it did go into the paint very well, if that makes sense. With the spell book, I used that brown again, and I watered it down. If you notice, I keep going into that water jar over there. Even there, I had to water it down even more. I was like, that's still too much thick of a paint. I could have definitely even used more layers of brown while doing this tint over the skin tone, and in the end you notice that I actually put in a dark brown for the hair that I don't really show here, but you'll see in the final result. I didn't want to make her just an exact match for my skin tone. Again, my household is not just there's not just black people in my household, and I kind of like that she was a bit more racially ambiguous in the final result. You'll see she's just so much lighter when you flip it around, and just darkening up her skin just a bit really did the trick for what I was looking for. These next 2 figures were so easy to paint. I used that mustard yellow again. And these, it was so easy. I think it was just because that pastel pink was basically a primer coat. It was so light, so it went on. As you see, I just used 1 coat of paint, and that's all it needed. When it dried, it didn't really show through. It wasn't splotchy. And as you can see, they turned out pretty great. Okay, this is where more instruction will come. If you see to the right, I'm mixing up a undertone using a pastel pink, or a natural buff is what the color is called, along with that brown that I spoke of earlier as an undertone, and then I added a green called lime green to that color. I mixed that up and added white to make it even lighter, but I used that original natural buff, which is a browner tone, so that it actually was a skin tone and wasn't just like a cartoon caricature. The idea for me going into this was, if my partner all of a sudden was The Walking Dead, what would his skin color look like? He already has like a light tan color, so using that undertone, and I think that also added to the vintage look of it. You notice that there's more of a layer than if I just used that lime green straight out of the tube. So yes, here I did mix some colors, but it literally was just, I wasn't using any special technique. I literally just used that natural buff, a little bit of brown undertone, and that lime green. You'll notice here that I'm putting in highlights. So that's the other thing about all of this. After I used that first layer that we mixed up, that was your base. I did that. I did the hair in a completely black color. I didn't add anything to it, just black. And then I thought, okay, now I need to add all the highlights. And for the highlights, it was just kind of like, okay, add white to it. If you notice, there is a gray undertone. I added just a little bit of black. And that, again, was thinking of the fact that, okay, this person's undead. They're going to have dark circles. They're going to have a gray tint to their skin because it's lifeless. So using that black and that rain gray was perfect to make that green undertone skin tone color I made just that much more like a shadow, and like a dead shadow. Not like, if I wasn't doing this for a live like body or person, I would probably be using that brown color to darken it up, or this color called espresso. But I didn't want to do that. I actually did the opposite of what they usually teach you when painting people, and I used an actual black color to make their skin deader. I put in the pupils, and if you notice here, I'm starting to put in his eyebrows. I kind of plucked them out there. When we get to the bride, I do something very different for her eyebrows, just for a more sleek look. But for him, I just used black straight out of the tube and plucked in some of his eyebrows just to make them bushy. Around his eyes, I used a color called espresso, which is just a really dark brown. And even then, I kind of added just a little bit of black just to make it even that much darker. Here, I'm now putting in the shadow, and if you see off to the right, again, I'm using his skin tone as a base in every color that I'm making, that original skin tone, and then I added brown to it. And by adding that brown, I'm darkening it, but not deadening the color. I put that color in all of the creases that were already there for me, and then, if you notice here, between his eyebrows, it's really thinned out. I'm using the same technique that we used on the spell book. I'm just using water. You'll see me go into that water cup many times. Right there, I went to the water cup. I'm just watering down everything. I even put water directly onto the figure to water out those places where I put that shadow in the first place. And it kind of gives us this watercolor effect. I think that just the washes, like right here in his cheekbones, that's a very severe wash, but like something about it seems like, oh, that's purposeful. It's very painterly, as they say in art school. And that's how I approached both of these figures. I didn't want it to necessarily look like really rendered and so blended out and everything. I wanted it to look painted because I did feel like that built to the vintage look, but also personally, I like when somebody makes something, I want to know that somebody made something. I think that's why I really loved how the Frankenstein
worked so well is because of those washes. There's just so many layers. With the bride, I feel like I did not do the best for her. I started off with a great base. If you saw, I did add that tan. I used a color called golden brown under her skin, and then used that gray, that dark gray over top of it, again, just to make it seem like if I all of a sudden was undead, and everything, and I feel like I did a disservice for her because I just don't feel like I did the washes the way as smooth as I did Frankenstein's washes. I think it still came out beautifully. The painterly like lines and everything were great, but I just don't feel like they were as smooth as what I did with Frankenstein. And that's also just to prove that, like, you know, even for somebody who gets told or went to art school or whatever, they still like have these moments where it's just like, yeah, and that wasn't completely perfect. Here is the eyebrows that I spoke about earlier. I figured, you know, Bride of Frankenstein, she's basically got to draw her eyebrows in, and she wants to make sure they're arched up. So I was really clean when I drew in her eyebrows. And if you notice, I also drew in a little flick of some eyeliner. On her lips, I have a very like pastel pink color. Again, she's undead, so not a lot of color there, just enough of rouge. And then I also added in her stitches just using a black. It was pretty simple doing this one. I love her undertone. I still love how you can see some of that golden brown showing through the gray. I just kind of wish I would have taken that a little bit further, and maybe mixed in that golden brown with all of the colors that I made for her. So if you see here, I just feel like there's so many layers for Frankenstein and there weren't as many for her. Now moving on to the vintage sign. I mocked up the sign on Procreate first. I am learning to plan before I make something, which is crazy because I never plan. I made this basically using a lot of inspiration from Pinterest. I just typed in vintage hand-painted Halloween signs and a lot of things came up. That's how I came up with basically the original design. If you see here, you'll see like some light sketching I did on the board. Again, I was planning out all of that, and it was hard to get it on camera. So I had to do that off camera, but essentially I was measuring out like how to draw from the Procreate program onto the sign without using any sort of projection and everything. So it is a little wonky, but it's hand painted. It's supposed to look wonky. You'll also notice that I did a lot of the werewolf mask or wolfman mask off camera. That's because the brown, for some reason, I had to put so many layers in order for it to show up on this orange for some reason. And again, it was getting to a point where it wasn't looking right on camera, to be honest. So if you look over at Creature, it was a lot easier to kind of show what we were doing. These were like retro masks, so really it was breaking them down to their shapes and then using very flat colors on top of it. If you notice, I'm building on every single layer. You have to think of this in layers. It's not, okay, I'll draw one mask and then I'll draw another mask and everything. That's where things end up getting really messy. I broke everything down and, okay, first I'm going to do that light brown on the werewolf, and then I'm going to do that green on the creature, and then I'm going to put the darker brown on top of that, and then I'm going to put these dark spots on top of creature and do his lips and everything. Every single portion is a layer that you build on top of it, and the line work, it was the very last thing, which kind of brought it all together. It looked really weird before that, if you remember. Going into the white, I made somewhat of a perfect circle, I suppose, and then doing this back shadow, this white behind the letters, that probably was some of the hardest, and that's because I am not a graphic designer. Kerning and everything and centering is not my strong point, so doing this really was hard. If you notice later on in just a moment, this part right here, do as I say and not as I do. I should have went back and forth with these letters. I should have made that B and then went to the end and then put in the quotation marks and the next letter and then go back and forth to meet in the middle, or figure out where my center was with this phrase. Because if you notice by the end of it, my phrase, look, wait a second, N, I'm going in for the S, hold on a second there. You see this N at the end? There's nothing over it. That makes no sense. It's not centered whatsoever, but that's human error. I think it still turned out great. I think it looks just like it was hand painted, because it was. But after I did that, I did use some sandpaper to age it up. Starting on the Apothercary jars, I did this in Procreate. Once again, I designed these just looking at some examples online of other apothecary pharmacy jars and everything, and so I made these using some old types of poison, cyanide, belladonna, strychnine. There was also laudanum, and I was so tired that night that I doubled belladonna. So one of these labels didn't get done because at that point I also was not going to do this all over again. This pen came in clutch. I was going to have to learn gold leafing, and it was going to be so messy. This pen actually worked out so good. I got it from Michael's. It was also a CraftSmart gold metallic pen, and it was in the same section as the gold leafing. It really showed up really well, and it's not really cheap. Like, it doesn't look cheap. As for how much it cost, it was really affordable. I think I paid like $4 for it, and it was at Michael's again. Make sure that you're always using your 20% off. This here was contact paper. I got a matte contact paper. I think that this actually was a glossy contact paper now that I'm looking at it. Also got it from Michael's. I got it off of a roll. I was going to use lamination sheets, and then I just thought the contact paper was going to be so much easier, which it was. I ended up cutting them down and placing them on the Apothercary jars that I ended up getting.
Hey y'all, so now that we finally finished all of the crafts, I want to go through them. I am still learning how to record, and I ended up putting the wrong mode on my camera. So essentially the entire outro I originally had for you guys it has no audio. Blessing and a curse, because now I guess I can actually walk through every single thing that we made and what it now looks like decorated. So bear with me, I am still learning, but I feel like maybe this was a better outro to actually have rather than what I originally did in the first place. So second time's a charm, I guess. So let's go through all of them. I can show you everything that we ended up making and where it ended up in our decorating, which a video will be coming out for that right after this one, so look out for that and subscribe down below if you want to see the walkthrough and how we put all of this together. Let's see what we ended up making. Starting off, I want to start with some of the repaints, the simple repaints that we ended up doing and everything. Up here you can see the witch that we ended up painting. Here is a video right here of how we started off and how it ended up. I think she's so cute. I know I say cute a lot, but she really did turn out really well. There had to be a couple of repaints in order for it to get this color and have a smooth consistency throughout of it. Keep that in mind if you're trying to repaint some of these things. The finish on your piece is gonna matter. I probably could have avoided that if I would have used a little bit of sandpaper or anything that I repainted, but looking back, I was being impatient or didn't realize that, so I would use sandpaper if you're going to repaint. The witch turned out beautifully. I think that it's exactly what I would have wanted for my figure, and I wish that they would have offered a figure like this automatically in the store. But luckily, we have craft paint. We always have craft paint. Another repaint that we did were the two nutcracker looking figures. One was a pumpkin and one was a skeleton. I ended up painting, they started off with pink bows. And first off is the pumpkin, I'll show that here. painting these were extremely easy. I don't know if it was because the light pink worked kind of as a primer since it was such a light base, but I only had to do one coat of paint on both of these figures. I'll show you where the skeleton ended up in just a second, but it was super easy paint. I would highly recommend it to anybody who right now is seeing a lot of pastel Halloween in the stores. You don't too much care for that, and it's a small part of it, that pink. I recommend, if you're absolutely in love with it, just taking it home and painting it with some craft paint, because that light pink actually kind of worked like a primer, and I only had to do like one swipe of paint, and that's it. It actually turned out really nice. The pumpkin one is right here, and I'll show you in just a second where the skeleton ended up. Since we're over here, I'm going to also point out the trick-or-treater right here that I got from the 99¢. I'll show a video here of where we started off and how it ended up. They turned out so well. Now, repainting these was a little harder because they had a bit of a glossy coat on top of them. They were like more so made of like a plasticky resin rather than the other, like the witch that we painted, which already had a matte base on it, and even the soldiers or whatever that we ended up painting. These took a couple of coats of paint. I thought they were going to be much easier to paint, so I started off with these, but they actually ended up needing like sometimes 5 coats of paint in order to get that first base on. I really loved how both this and the cat that I'll go back and show you guys turned out. I just think that they look so much better in traditional Halloween with the bows that they ended up having. You can kind of see it right here, and you will be able to see it on the video that I post, but the bow on the cat was probably harder to pull off. For some reason, the color that it started off with was just really hard to paint over, but I really love the candy corn that we ended up with, and I just think both of them look so much more traditionally Halloween than the colors they started off with. I really recommend, if you can get a hold of these at a 99¢ store, to get them. They were $15 a piece as opposed to the $30 that I usually see at Home Goods. 99¢ did so good with their Halloween this year. The only thing I had with these was just they just did not fit my full color scheme, but they look so cute now that I've painted them. Another small thing that I did with a couple of older items that I already had with my Halloween things was using a hot glue gun and crepe paper. I had all these rolls of crepe paper and I didn't know what to do with them. And I realized some of my most favorite trick-or-treaters, and I don't know if it's on this side, I think it's on the other side, and I'll show that in just a second. They have these paper collars and they look extremely vintage. So I did that on this guy right here, and he turned out really cute. I got him from Walmart last year, and he already looked folk type of Halloween, which I love, but I felt like he could just be that much better. So I put a crepe collar around his hat, as well as in his little trick-or-treat bag, and I really think that made all the difference. And now I have use for that banner material, that crepe paper material, so probably in the future there'll be more of that. You can't really see it from here, and I didn't get much video of it since it was such a small little change, but this is the trick-or-treater I was talking about before that is really vintage looking and had that paper collar around it that I absolutely love. In his little bucket that's like a skull, which I just think is so, it's just a really good mold. I ended up also filling their bucket with like this crepe paper as well, and I just think it looks kind of nice having something in the bucket besides just the bucket on its own. But what you can see are the 2 busts that I'm actually in love with. I'm going to show a video here because I'm so proud of them and how they turned out. Even my partner was surprised with how good they turned out. They look very hand painted and vintage. They have been sitting in like my Halloween stuff for the past 3 years now. I got them at Joann's, I think, for like $2 a piece. And I've always meant to paint them, never got around to it, and I finally did. They turned out so good. The bride over here and the Frankenstein over here, which I really think the Frankenstein turned out so good. And they really work just amazing with everything up there. I'm glad that I finally got around to painting them, and I think that they look great with the faux vintage sign that we also ended up painting. I'm gonna have a full video here so you can see it up close, but it's like the focal point of the bookcase, and I love that everything kind of comes off of it. I love how it turned out and everything. I want to do more of these signs, maybe during Christmas, or to do another one somewhere else in the house that's kind of smaller and not so big as this one that's taking up the full corner. I really just roughed it up with some sandpaper after we painted it, and that really changed it from looking like a brand new sign that was just painted into something that looked more like it was a vintage hand painted sign that I had picked up somewhere at an antique store or something like that. One of the last crafts we ended up doing was a really big one, and I was thrifting for it in the Halloween Thrift With Me video, and that were these Apothecary bottles that are right here on this second shelf. I'll have a video right here of how close up of how those turned out, but I love how they turned out. I think that if I was to do it again, I would change just a few things, especially on the rounded belladonna jar over here, just because of sizing and how it kind of ended up wrinkled. But other than that, something like the cyanide or the arsenic or even the strychnine bottle, I just think turned out really good. The metallic paint pen that we ended up buying from Michael's instead of using actual gold leafing turned out perfectly, and the glossy contact paper made it look laminated. And they were really like easy. Like that ended up being a pretty quick craft, and saved me upwards of like $60. So, you know, if you're fine with not getting something that's absolute vintage, I absolutely recommend trying this if you have like a witch theme this year. I think it turned out really good. I think that it makes the little witch scene that we're doing here like a really nice look. Another craft, and I think that this is the second to last one that we did, was the Apothecary book over here. I'll have a closer look right here, but the Apothecary book that we ended up getting from TJ Maxx, I ended up just painting over that. That was one of our repaints, and I think that the witch turned out looking really nice. You can see how the witch originally looked and how just with some thinned out paint and everything, we could just change easily the race of the witch. I love that we could have some more representation in the house by just changing up some of the things that were automatically given to us with just a little coat of paint. I think that took literally like 10 seconds. This was all basically done with just one coat of brown. So there was really good payoff, and I loved how it turned out. The last craft or repaint that we ended up doing was this guy. I ended up buying him from Home Goods. I think he was probably the first thing I bought this Halloween hunting season. So originally he just had a simple like black small bow tie here. I took that off and used a glue gun to put another bow here that's in like this check pattern, and I had the Target selling these kind of like Lee Max knockoff kind of small village things this year for $1. I got a bunch of these pumpkins for crafts and also for the village we ended up making, and I thought he'd be cute with a little one right here on his top hat. And I think that just those small changes made him that much more cute and everything. Through all of the crafts that we ended up getting through, I think that they turned out really cute. I'm always saying cute, but I think that they turned out so great. They fit into all of their little spaces really nice, and even the ones that were I just needed to paint or to add just a little like bow onto or a little hot glue gun, they were that much better after I made the changes that I made. I hope that going through some of these crafts really helped you to like see things a little differently when going through the stores. Also seeing how easy it is to possibly make your own. I get asked a lot, like when I craft or make anything, wow, that turned out so good, how did you make that? That must have taken forever. And in all honesty, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's really just like breaking down and reverse engineering a couple of things. I think the thing that took the longest was probably painting the trick-or-treaters, and that's because of how much paint was involved with like repainting over and over and layering. I mean, the bust, of course, like, yes, that's a learning curve, but again, a lot of that was made from just layering the paint, starting off with a base and then just thinking of shadows and highlights. Hopefully there's some more crafts that we can get into. I'm hoping to make a Frankenstein doll that kind of looks vintage, more like Halloween inspired signs. I have a lot of different ideas. but I especially want to make the dolls. That's something that I wanted to thrift this year or buy vintage, but they were just asking a lot, so I'm hoping that I can make that. I wanted to include that in this video, but we just didn't get to it because it was a lot more that went into it than I thought. I think I had 11 crafts that I wanted to get through, and I got through almost all of them except for the potpourri, which that ended up like needing way more than I thought it would have. And the doll, which again, I think the crafting for that definitely is skill based, because even I was like, that's a lot, and things weren't coming together how they wanted to, and we had basically 2 days to finish all of these crafts that I wanted to get through. So considering there were like 11 or 12 things we wanted to get done, and I got through all but 2 of them within basically 2 or 3 days, I'm impressed with myself. I think they looked really good. I think they turned out really good, and that just means that those other crafts I didn't get to are going to be presented sometime in Halloween. So subscribe down below, like if you really like this video. Let me know what you thought about any of the crafts that I ended up doing, or if you're going to try any of the crafts, or if there are any crafts or DIYs that you've gotten to already while people are putting up their Halloween decorations early, because I would love to get some more ideas of things to do during October to kind of get in the spirit. Thanks for watching, and I hope that this was helpful for you. Bye guys.